My husband was secretly recording our intimate moments and sharing them with his work buddies while I was pregnant, so I divorced him and got him sent to federal prison. 3 years later, he got out early and started stalking me through my coworkers. Me and my husband's relationship was amazing, until I found our tapes in his work group chat. Up until this point, everything was going smoothly. I was pregnant with a baby on the way, and the pregnancy hormones were making my kitty cat go crazy, if you catch my drift. And since my husband Daniel found baby bumps mega attractive, this pretty much worked out for both of us. My last boyfriend had leaked my nudes and ruined my life, so it took a lot for me to trust again. And it's not like we weren't making love, but it was definitely on the much more vanilla side. But during the pregnancy, he spent every night on his knees before bed and told my baby belly about his day. Sometimes I'd catch him whispering promises about being a good dad, and that just activated something in me. So much so that I started to trust him with my body. Plus, he'd always say things like, "We'll never do anything you don't want to do," or, "If you ever want me to stop, tell me and I'll stop straight away." And I know this is the bare minimum, but to a girl like me who was hurt the way I was, it was everything. It made me fall in love all over again. I was lying in bed right beside him when I couldn't sleep, and my phone had somehow jumped from 10% to 1% to completely dead in just a few minutes. So I simply stole Daniel, my husband's phone, to entertain myself with some shitty Adam Sandler movie. As soon as I turned it on, I saw a notification pop up. It was his friend from his work group chat. Damn, my boy Daniel getting silly with it, followed by eggplant and peach emojis. Curiosity piqued my interest, and I ended up clicking on it. What I saw made me feel so sick I wanted to vomit all over him. Right there wasn't just one video of us having sex. Number, it was dozens. I had no idea he was even recording us. I immediately threw his phone down beside him and spent the rest of the night lying wide awake with my hand on my belly. What the F are you supposed to do in these situations? Well, actually, I knew exactly what. The next time we made love, I started whispering things that I knew he was too busy to hear. "Why is it so small? I can barely feel it. I wish it was your brother instead," are all things I said LOL. The rest of the day he acted completely normal, until the next morning, because that's when he realized that I had figured out he was filming us. But instead of confronting the issue and apologizing, he tried to get me to bring it up, kept asking if I was okay, if I was excited to have the baby with him. And when I wouldn't budge, he started love bombing me with flowers and chocolates, something he hadn't even done since we first met. But I couldn't enjoy it, because every time I looked at him, I was reminded of how he talked about me in his group chat. Things like, "Pregnancy brain makes them so easy to manipulate. She actually believes I want this baby LOL," and "Damaged goods from her ex, but I'm fixing that with this D." Like what? And for some reason, he was actually surprised when I handed him divorce papers later that week. So I finally confirmed what I saw, and he pointed his head towards the floor like he was ashamed. He tried to win me back, to tell me that it wasn't that bad because he didn't even show my face. But all of it just made me feel even more disgusted, and I knew there was no way I could ever let my future daughter go anywhere near him. I left for my mother's that same day, and she agreed that I had done the right thing, and she would help me raise my baby girl. I spent the rest of the day crying, not just for me, but for little Isabella, who wouldn't grow up with her bio dad, for the home we had that was destroyed. But when I woke up that morning, my pain was exemplified, because someone had made an Instagram to promote my LonelyFans, one that I had never created. The fake account had photos from our marriage that I thought were deleted. Private moments that Daniel had secretly kept were now advertising adult content I never made. I scrolled through the posts and felt my stomach drop. Each photo had captions suggesting I was available for private sessions. My hands shook as I checked who followed the account. Daniel's personal profile was right there in the followers list. I took screenshots of everything before the account could disappear. My mom helped me file a police report that afternoon. The officer said these cases were tough because the account used overseas servers. They gave me a case number and said they'd investigate, but warned it could take months. I changed all my passwords and locked down my social media. My cousin Marcus worked in tech support and offered to help. He came over that evening and started digging into the account details. After an hour of clicking around, he found something interesting. The password recovery email linked back to Daniel's work address. I couldn't believe he was that stupid. Marcus took screenshots and saved everything to a flash drive. I texted Daniel demanding answers, but he claimed he had no idea about the account, said someone must have hacked his email or something. But I knew he was lying because he'd already been following it. The next day, I confronted him at his apartment when I went to grab more of my stuff. He kept denying it until I showed him the evidence Marcus found. Then his story changed to his coworker Jake helping him set it up, said it was just a prank that went too far. I recorded the whole conversation on my phone without him knowing. Jake started sending me anonymous messages that night, threatening to post more content if I didn't drop the divorce proceedings. The messages came from different numbers, but the writing style was always the same. I saved every single one and forwarded them to my lawyer. My sister Maria called me the next morning with news that made everything worse. She worked at the same bank Daniel used and noticed suspicious activity on our joint accounts. Turns out he'd been gambling away our savings at work poker games. He owed Jake thousands of dollars from losing badly. That explained why Jake was helping him with this revenge scheme. I discovered Daniel had forged my signature on paperwork for a second mortgage on our house. The money was already gone, probably to pay his gambling debts. My lawyer said this was fraud, and we could press criminal charges. But first, we needed to protect my remaining assets. We found out Daniel had been moving money to accounts in his mother's name. Gloria always babied him, so I wasn't surprised she was helping. My lawyer subpoenaed the bank records and found almost $50,000 hidden away. This was money from our wedding gifts and my inheritance from my grandmother. During our first mediation meeting, Gloria showed up uninvited and started rambling. She mentioned giving Daniel money to pay Jake's computer friend for some project. My lawyer perked up immediately and started asking questions. Gloria realized she'd messed up and tried to backtrack, but it was too late. Marcus used this information to trace payments to a local college student named Jordan. We found him through social media, and I reached out pretending to need similar services. Jordan agreed to meet at a coffee shop near campus. He was just a kid trying to pay tuition. When I explained the situation, Jordan felt terrible and offered to help. He showed me emails from Daniel with specific instructions about the fake accounts. Daniel had paid him to create multiple profiles across different platforms. Jordan gave me copies of everything including payment records. I took it all to Daniel's workplace and met with HR. They were horrified when I showed them the group chat messages and evidence of him using work email for illegal activities. They fired him that same day and said they'd cooperate with any investigation. Jake wasn't there, but they suspended him pending review. That evening, Jake showed up at the grocery store while I was shopping. He cornered me in the cereal aisle and started making threats. Said I was ruining Daniel's life over nothing. Security cameras caught the whole thing and staff called the police. I filed for a restraining order against both men the next day. The judge granted it immediately based on the evidence. Daniel couldn't come within 500 feet of me or contact me except through lawyers. Jake got the same restrictions. Gloria tried to convince me to take Daniel back. She showed up at my mom's house crying about how Daniel really loved the baby. But then she slipped up and mentioned Daniel had been telling everyone I trapped him with the pregnancy. That confirmed what I already suspected from the group chat messages. My mom helped me pack up and move to my Aunt Martha's house 2 towns over. We didn't tell anyone except family where I was going. I needed somewhere safe to prepare for the baby without constant stress. But Daniel still found out somehow. He started driving by the house at odd hours, always staying just outside the restraining order distance. My aunt installed security cameras after we spotted his car 3 nights in a row. The stress was affecting my pregnancy, and my doctor advised complete rest. Daniel showed up at my prenatal appointment even though I'd switched doctors twice trying to avoid him. I was sitting in the waiting room, nervously flipping through a parenting magazine when the door opened and he walked in like he owned the place. My heart dropped into my stomach. He was wearing his work clothes, that same blue button-down he'd worn on our first date, acting like nothing was wrong. The other pregnant women in the waiting room shifted uncomfortably as he scanned the room until his eyes landed on me. I immediately stood up and walked to the reception desk, my hands shaking as I whispered to the receptionist that the man who just walked in had a restraining order against him. She didn't hesitate, immediately picking up the phone to call security while Daniel started walking toward me, saying we needed to talk about our baby. 2 security guards arrived within minutes and escorted him out while he yelled about his rights as the father, claiming I was keeping his child from him. The entire waiting room watched in stunned silence. The police arrived 20 minutes later and arrested him for violating the restraining order, but my doctor told me later that he posted bail that same night. My lawyer called the next morning with more bad news that made my stomach churn. Daniel had opened 3 credit cards in my name and maxed them all out on electronics, jewelry, and cash advances. I spent the entire day on the phone with credit agencies, my voice hoarse from repeating my social security number and explaining the situation over and over. Each company required different forms and documentation. I had to file separate identity theft reports with each credit card company, faxing copies of the restraining order and police reports. The debt totaled over $20,000 that I didn't even know existed. My excellent credit score, which I'd worked years to build, was destroyed overnight. The financial counselor at my bank said it would take months, maybe years, to fully recover. Jake's girlfriend reached out through Facebook Messenger on a Thursday evening. Her name was Kayla, and her profile picture showed a pretty blonde woman with kind eyes. Her message was tentative at first, saying she'd discovered something about her boyfriend that made her sick, and she thought I should know. I was suspicious initially, wondering if this was another trap, but something in her tone sounded genuinely upset. We exchanged several messages before agreeing to meet at a public park the following Saturday. I brought my mom along for safety, and we sat at a picnic table near the playground where other families were around. Kayla looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. She told me Jake had done this before with other couples, that she'd found evidence on his laptop when he left it open. She had screenshots of him bragging in online forums about ruining women's lives for money, treating it like some kind of game. Apparently, he got paid by bitter exes to create revenge content when relationships went bad. She said she'd been with him for 2 years and never suspected, but finding those messages made her physically ill. She couldn't stand being with someone who hurt innocent people like that. We spent the entire afternoon going through her phone, which contained dozens of screenshots she'd taken before confronting him. Jake had a whole folder of conversations about different women he'd targeted over the past 5 years. Some messages were from years ago, detailing his success stories and payment arrangements. He even had a price list for different types of harassment campaigns. The basic package started at $500 for simple social media posts, while the premium destruction package cost $5,000 and included fake websites, doctored images, and coordinated harassment from multiple accounts. Kayla gave me everything she had, transferring all the files to my phone and email. She said she was leaving him that night, already had her bags packed in her car. She couldn't stand being in the same room with someone who took pleasure in destroying lives. Before she left, she hugged me and apologized for not discovering it sooner. Marcus texted me late one night with a warning that made my blood run cold. He'd been monitoring Daniel's social media accounts and noticed increasingly erratic behavior. Daniel had been posting cryptic messages about losing everything that mattered, about how some people didn't deserve what they had. His friends were commenting on his posts asking if he was okay, if he needed help. Some suggested he talk to someone professional. Marcus thought he might be spiraling and could do something desperate, so I needed to be extra careful. He sent me screenshots of the most concerning posts, including one where Daniel wrote about how justice would come for those who wronged him. The comments from his friends grew more worried with each post, some even asking if they should call someone. I spent the next day installing additional security cameras at my aunt's house, wanting to cover every possible angle. The doorbell camera had night vision and motion detection that sent alerts to my phone. I added motion sensors to the backyard that would trigger floodlights if anyone approached. My Aunt Martha didn't mind the intrusion because she wanted us safe above everything else. She'd been through her own nightmare divorce years ago when my uncle turned violent, and she understood the constant fear of looking over your shoulder. She helped me test all the cameras and showed me how to access the feeds from her computer too. We created a safety plan where she would call 911 immediately if she saw anything suspicious, no hesitation. Daniel's mother Gloria showed up at the front door on a Tuesday morning with a manila envelope full of papers she claimed were custody documents. She was dressed in her church clothes, trying to look official and intimidating. She insisted I had to appear in court the following week, or I would lose all rights to my baby. Her hands shook slightly as she handed me the papers, but her voice was firm with conviction. Something seemed off about the documents immediately. The formatting was wrong, the language didn't sound legal. My lawyer confirmed my suspicions within an hour. They were completely fake, downloaded from some website that sold bogus legal forms. Gloria had filled in the blanks and printed them on nice paper, thinking I wouldn't know the difference. We added this attempted fraud to our growing evidence pile. My lawyer said impersonating court documents was a serious crime that could result in jail time. The stress of everything finally caught up with my body, and I went into early labor at 35 weeks. I was folding baby clothes in the nursery when the first contraction hit, sharp and unexpected. My mom rushed me to the hospital while I tried to breathe through increasingly painful contractions. The nurses were amazing, immediately hooking me up to monitors and getting me stabilized with medication to slow the labor. They explained that 35 weeks was early but not dangerously so, that babies born at this stage usually did very well. But then Daniel somehow found out I was there there and tried to get into the maternity ward, claiming to be my husband. Security stopped him at the elevator when he couldn't provide any identification matching my information. He made such a scene that they called the police, screaming about discrimination and his rights as a father. I could hear him yelling from my room about how I was stealing his child, how the hospital was complicit in kidnapping. The nurses quickly moved me to a different floor for safety, using a service elevator so we wouldn't run into him. My mom stayed by my side the whole time, holding my hand and keeping me calm. After 12 hours of labor that felt like an eternity, Isabella was born healthy despite being 5 weeks early. She weighed 5 pounds, 2 ounces, and had the tiniest, most perfect fingers I'd ever seen. Her first cry was strong and loud, filling the delivery room with the most beautiful sound. I cried holding her for the first time, overwhelmed by love and relief that she was okay. My mom took pictures while the nurses cleaned her up and performed their tests. Isabella scored well on all her assessments, breathing on her own without any assistance. We didn't post anything online to keep Daniel from knowing she'd been born. The hospital put a security alert on our room, and only approved visitors could enter. The nurses were extra vigilant, checking every person who came near our room. Daniel got arrested again 2 days later for trying to use my information at a bank downtown. The teller, a sharp young woman named Patricia, recognized my name from a fraud alert in their system and quietly called the police while keeping him distracted. He was trying to add himself to my accounts, claiming we were married and he'd lost his identification. This time the prosecutor said they had enough evidence for serious federal charges. Identity theft, harassment, stalking, and fraud could mean significant prison time. The federal charges carried mandatory minimums that would keep him locked up for years. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Janet Rodriguez, said she was tired of seeing men like Daniel terrorize women without consequences. Jake's girlfriend Kayla testified to the prosecutor about everything she knew, bringing all the screenshots and evidence of Jake's past schemes. She spent 3 hours in the prosecutor's office going through each conversation, explaining the context and connections. She'd done her own research after leaving him, finding some of his victims online and reaching out to them. Several women agreed to testify about how Jake's harassment campaigns had affected their lives. One woman had lost her job, another had to move states to escape the harassment. The prosecutor was building a strong case that showed a pattern of criminal behavior spanning years. They offered Jake a deal for 2 years probation if he testified against Daniel and provided all his communications about the scheme. The college student Jordan also agreed to testify for the prosecution. He came to the prosecutor's office with his parents, looking young and scared. He felt terrible about his part in everything and wanted to make it right. He explained how Daniel had recruited him, promising easy money for harmless pranks that escalated into serious harassment. Jordan provided all the original photos and videos he'd created, plus communications showing Daniel's specific instructions for each piece of content. His testimony would prove Daniel orchestrated everything from the beginning. The prosecutor said Jordan's cooperation was crucial for proving the conspiracy charges. Daniel's co-workers came forward with more disturbing stories about his behavior at work. They'd been uncomfortable with the group chat for months but didn't know what to do without risking their own jobs. Now they provided detailed statements about his comments and attitude toward women. One co-worker, Brian, said Daniel often bragged about putting women in their place and shared degrading memes daily. Another co-worker, Michelle, described how Daniel would rate female employees on their appearance and make crude jokes about what he'd do to them. His former boss submitted all the evidence from his work computer, including saved images and bookmarked websites that showed a pattern of misogynistic behavior. The IT department found he'd been using work computers to access revenge porn sites during business hours. Gloria finally saw the truth when she discovered Daniel had been stealing from her too. She'd noticed discrepancies in her bank statements, but assumed they were errors. When she investigated further, she found he'd been taking money from her accounts for months to pay off gambling debts she didn't even know he had. She discovered forged checks made out to cash and unauthorized transfers to online gambling sites. The theft totaled over $30,000 from her retirement savings. She came to my aunt's house on a rainy Sunday evening, crying and apologizing profusely. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past month, her usually perfect hair unkempt and her eyes red from crying. She said she'd testify against her own son if needed, that she couldn't enable him anymore. She'd raised him better than this and couldn't understand where she went wrong. The fake accounts were finally taken down after weeks of court orders and legal battles. Each website required different documentation and had different procedures for removal. It took a team of lawyers and countless hours of paperwork, but they disappeared one by one. Marcus helped me search for any remaining content, using specialized software to scan the darker corners of the internet. We found a few more sites that Jordan hadn't told us about, hidden behind passwords and private forums. Got those removed too through cease and desist orders. Some sites tried to fight the removal, claiming free speech, but the court orders were clear about the criminal nature of the content. Daniel lost all custody rights in the divorce proceedings after a lengthy hearing. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, said his behavior showed he was unfit to parent and posed a danger to any child. She reviewed all the evidence of harassment, stalking, and fraud, shaking her head in disgust. He'd have to pay child support once he got out of prison, though the amount would be minimal given his incarceration. The divorce was finalized just as Isabella turned 2 months old. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders when I signed the final papers, officially free from any legal connection to him. I started rebuilding my credit with help from a financial counselor named David, who specialized in identity theft recovery. Each fraudulent account had to be disputed individually with different forms and evidence. Some companies were helpful, others required multiple appeals and threats of legal action. It took months of paperwork, phone calls, and frustrating conversations with customer service representatives who didn't understand the situation. But slowly, account by account, my credit score started recovering. David taught me about credit monitoring and fraud alerts to prevent future theft. My family rallied around us in amazing ways that still make me tear up thinking about it. My sister Maria organized a baby shower after Isabella was born, collecting everything we needed since I'd been too stressed to prepare properly. My mom watched Isabella while I dealt with legal meetings and court appearances, never complaining about the disruption to her retirement plans. My Aunt Martha insisted we stay as long as needed, converting her guest room into a beautiful nursery. Even my teenage cousins pitched in with babysitting, playing with Isabella for hours so I could rest or handle paperwork. The village of support made survival possible. I joined a support group for women dealing with digital harassment that met weekly at a community center. The first meeting was terrifying, walking into a room of strangers and admitting what happened to me. But hearing other stories helped me realize I wasn't alone in this nightmare. Some Some women had been through worse situations, their exes creating elaborate campaigns that lasted years. We shared practical tips for staying safe online, protecting our privacy, and rebuilding our lives. The group leader, a survivor herself, taught us about digital footprints and how to minimize our online presence while still living normal lives. Daniel got 3 years in federal prison for all the charges combined. The judge, a stern man who'd seen too many cases like this, said Daniel's pattern of behavior showed no remorse and a high likelihood of reoffending. He'd have to serve at least 18 months before possible parole, and any violation would mean serving the full sentence. His lawyer tried to argue for less time, claiming Daniel was a first-time offender who'd made mistakes in emotional distress. But the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutor presented a timeline showing months of calculated harassment and criminal behavior. The courtroom was packed with Daniel's victims and their supporters. When the sentence was read, I heard several women crying with relief. Jake got 2 years probation and mandatory counseling as part of his plea deal. He had to pay restitution to all his victims, though the amounts were small compared to the damage done. The judge ordered him to stay off all social media and away from any revenge sites. If he violated probation even once, he'd serve 2 years in jail. He also had to complete 200 hours of community service at a domestic violence shelter, though they could only use him for maintenance work away from clients. The counseling was specifically for people who commit cybercrimes, a new program designed to address the growing problem. I moved back to my hometown once everything settled down, finding a small but safe apartment near my mom. The complex had good security with key fob entry and cameras in all common areas. Isabella's nursery overlooked a quiet tree-lined street where children played. I started a new job with understanding bosses at a nonprofit that helped crime victims. They let me adjust my schedule for daycare and court appointments without question. My coworkers became friends who understood why I was cautious about sharing personal information. Isabella grew into a happy, curious toddler who loved her grandma and aunts fiercely. She had my brown eyes but thankfully looked nothing like Daniel. Her features were softer, her smile genuine and warm. Every milestone felt like a victory after everything we'd been through. Her first steps happened at my mom's house during Sunday dinner, with everyone cheering and recording videos. She said mama first, then gamma for grandma, then surprised everyone with kitty when she saw my aunt's cat. Each word, each laugh, each hug healed another piece of my broken heart. I eventually started a blog about surviving digital harassment, keeping it anonymous but sharing resources that helped me. The first post took hours to write, my hands shaking as I typed our story. Other women reached out within days with their own experiences. Some just needed someone who understood the unique terror of having your life destroyed online. The blog grew into a small community of survivors supporting each other through comments and private messages. We shared lawyer recommendations, security tips, and most importantly, hope that life could be normal again. My lawyer helped me understand my rights for the future, spending hours explaining custody laws and protection options. We set up safeguards to protect Isabella from any contact with Daniel, including specific language and custody documents that would trigger immediate legal action if he tried to reach out. Created a comprehensive file of all the evidence in case he tried anything after prison. Made sure her school and daycare had copies of the restraining order and Daniel's photo. The daycare director, a grandmother herself, assured me they took these situations seriously and had protocols in place. The support group expanded to include legal workshops that drew women from 3 counties. We brought in lawyers who volunteered their time to explain restraining orders, identity theft, and custody rights. Tech experts taught us about privacy settings, secure communications, and how to spot fake accounts. Everyone shared what they'd learned from their experiences, creating a knowledge base that helped new victims. The workshops were free, but donations helped us rent larger spaces as attendance grew. Isabella started preschool at 3 years old at a small Montessori school with excellent security. She made friends easily and loved story time, always asking for one more book. The teacher said she was bright and social, sharing toys without prompting and comforting other children when they were sad. I watched her play through the window sometimes, marveling at her confidence and joy. My mom picked her up most days while I worked, and they'd stop for ice cream or visit the library. Their bond was beautiful to watch, healing generational wounds I didn't even know existed. Daniel's release date approached when Isabella turned 4, causing familiar anxiety to creep back. My lawyer filed to extend the restraining order before he could even think about contacting us. The judge agreed immediately based on his prison behavior reports. He'd been disciplined multiple times for harassment through other inmates, having them contact women on the outside. He'd joined a prison gang for protection, but still got into fights over his crimes. Still hadn't learned his lesson or shown any remorse. The extended order would last another 5 years with option to renew. We moved to a new apartment with better security just to be safe, though I hated uprooting Isabella from familiar surroundings. The new place had controlled access, security cameras in all hallways, and a doorman who knew our situation. I installed new cameras and alarms in our unit, maybe going overboard but unable to shake the hypervigilance. Changed our routines and routes to school, varying pickup times and locations. My family understood the precautions and helped us settle in, making the new apartment feel like home with familiar pictures and toys. I met other single moms at Isabella's school who became genuine friends without knowing our full story. We had playdates at the park and helped each other with pickups when work ran late. They knew I was divorced but not the details, and that was okay. We were just normal families living normal lives, complaining about homework and planning birthday parties. That's all I wanted for my daughter. Normalcy, stability, and joy without the shadow of trauma. The blog turned into a registered nonprofit organization helping harassment victims after readers suggested expanding our reach. We raised money through small donations and grants for legal aid and counseling services. Partnered with established domestic violence shelters to offer tech safety classes for their clients. What started as my healing journal became a resource helping hundreds of women each year. We created guides in multiple languages, hosted webinars, and even developed a safety app that helped women document harassment securely. Isabella asked about her dad when she turned 5, a question I dreaded but prepared for with her therapist. I told her age-appropriate truth, that her dad wasn't safe to be around, that sometimes adults make bad choices that hurt others. She accepted it with the matter-of-fact wisdom children possess, and went back to playing with her dolls. I knew harder questions would come later, but her therapist assured me we'd handle them together. For now, she was satisfied knowing she was loved and safe. My mom retired early and became Isabella's full-time grandma, a role she embraced with enthusiasm. They baked cookies every Wednesday, went to the park daily weather permitting, and had elaborate tea parties with stuffed animals. They painted pictures that covered my mom's refrigerator and read hundreds of books, the same ones over and over until I could recite them them from memory. The bond they shared healed something deep in me, proving that love could overcome trauma. Isabella had male role models in my cousins and uncles who showed her how real men behave, with kindness, respect, and appropriate boundaries. Daniel tried contacting me through his mother when Isabella was 6, just after starting first grade. Gloria forwarded a letter saying he'd changed in prison, found religion, and wanted to be part of Isabella's life. The letter was full of manipulation tactics I recognize now, blame shifting, minimizing his crimes, and claiming I was hurting Isabella by keeping her from her father. My lawyer responded with copies of the restraining order and documentation of his continued harassment from prison, made it clear any contact would violate his parole and result in immediate reincarceration. Gloria apologized for forwarding it, said she just wanted to do right by her granddaughter she'd never meet. The nonprofit grew beyond my wildest dreams, helping hundreds of women each year escape digital harassment. We opened a physical office with computers for safe searching and private meeting rooms for consultations, offered free meetings with lawyers and therapists who volunteered their time, created comprehensive guides for documenting harassment, protecting privacy, and rebuilding after digital abuse. Every success story reminded me why this work mattered. Women would send updates years later about their new lives, their children thriving, their careers rebuilt. Isabella thrived in elementary school without the drama or trauma that marked her beginning. She played soccer with enthusiasm, if not skill, took art classes where she painted abstract masterpieces only a mother could love, and made friends easily, had sleepovers where they stayed up too late giggling, and birthday parties at the park with homemade cake. The normal childhood I'd fought to give her was her reality. Teachers consistently said she was kind and confident, standing up for classmates who were bullied and including everyone in games. I finally felt ready to date when Isabella was 7, my therapist agreeing I'd done the work to trust again. Met a nice guy named Robert through mutual friends at a barbecue where our kids played together. He was a single dad who understood boundaries and the pace of dating with children involved. He was patient and never pushed to meet Isabella until I was ready, respecting that her safety and comfort came first. We took things slow, meeting for coffee during lunch breaks and texting about our days. He made me laugh again, something I'd forgotten I could do. We built trust over months of honest conversation and consistent behavior. The support group celebrated 10 years of helping women escape digital harassment with a conference that drew attendees from across the country. We'd assisted over 1,000 cases by then, from simple privacy breaches to complex international harassment campaigns. Each woman got personalized help and ongoing support through our network of volunteers. Many became volunteers themselves after healing, paying forward the help they'd received. The conference featured panels of survivors, legal experts, and tech professionals sharing the latest strategies for protection and recovery. Daniel finished parole but stayed away as ordered. The consequences finally clear. Gloria said he'd moved across the country for work and construction, keeping a low profile. She sent birthday cards for Isabella that I kept unopened in a file, evidence if ever needed. Good riddance as far as I was concerned. Isabella didn't need him and never would. We built a beautiful life without his chaos, surrounded by chosen family who showed up consistently with love and support. She had a mother who'd fought for her safety, a grandmother who adored her, and a community that embraced us both. That was more than enough. Robert and I dated for almost a year before I introduced him to Isabella. We met at a neutral location, the Science Museum, where kids could get distracted by exhibits if things felt awkward. Isabella was more interested in the dinosaur bones than meeting mommy's friend, which was perfect. Robert didn't try to win her over with gifts or forced enthusiasm. He just answered her million questions about fossils and helped her with the interactive displays. By the end of the day, she declared him pretty smart for a grown-up, which was high praise from an 8-year-old. Daniel's mother Gloria passed away suddenly from a heart attack when Isabella was 9. I found out through Facebook when mutual acquaintances posted condolences. Part of me felt sad for the grandmother Isabella never knew, but mostly I felt relief that another connection to Daniel was gone. Gloria's sister reached out saying she'd left something for Isabella in her will. I was suspicious, but met with the lawyer who handed over a savings bond for Isabella's education and a letter I'd decide whether to give her when she was older. The letter was Gloria's apology for raising a son who could hurt women the way Daniel did. She wrote about seeing the signs when he was young but making excuses, enabling behavior she should have corrected. She wanted Isabella to know her grandmother loved her even from afar and hoped she'd grow up strong like her mother. I cried reading it, then locked it in my safe deposit box for someday when Isabella was ready to process that part of her history. My nonprofit work led to speaking engagements at colleges about digital safety. I'd stand in front of auditoriums full of young women and tell our story, watching their faces change from skepticism to horror to determination. After one talk at the local community college, a girl named Anna approached me shaking. Her ex was doing the same thing to her right now, she said, had posted private photos on a revenge site the week before. We got her connected with resources that same day, and she filed police reports with our advocates' help. Isabella joined the school orchestra in 4th grade, choosing violin because she liked how it looked. The screeching practice sessions tested everyone's patience, but she stuck with it. Robert would sit through painful recitals with me, both of us clapping enthusiastically for every squeaky performance. He never overstepped as a parent figure, staying in the supportive adult friend lane unless Isabella specifically asked for his help. She started calling him by his first name comfortably, including him in drawings of our family. Jake violated his probation after 18 months by creating new social media accounts. Someone in our support group recognized his writing style in harassment messages they'd received and reported it immediately. The police arrested him at his new job at an electronics store. This time the judge had no patience for excuses. Jake got the full 2 years in jail he'd avoided before. His new girlfriend reached out to thank us for the warning, said she'd noticed red flags, but our story confirmed her instincts to leave. I started teaching self-defense classes specifically for women who'd experienced stalking or harassment. The physical empowerment helped with the mental healing. We'd practice scenarios like someone approaching your car or following you in a store. The women would arrive nervous and leave feeling capable. Isabella would sometimes watch from the side, absorbing lessons about boundaries and strength I hoped she'd never need but wanted her to have. Daniel tried one last manipulation when Isabella turned 10. He had another inmate's girlfriend post on social media about what a great father was being kept from his child. The post went semi-viral in certain men's rights groups before we got it taken down. They painted me as the evil ex using the system to alienate a loving father. People who didn't know the real story sent horrible messages calling me bitter and vindictive. Our lawyer sent cease and desist letters to everyone involved, and the post disappeared within days. The harassment attempt backfired spectacularly when journalists looked into Daniel's actual crimes. A local reporter wrote a feature article about our nonprofit and how we helped women escape digital abuse. She interviewed several survivors who shared their stories of rebuilding after online harassment. The article won awards and brought more volunteers and donations than ever. Daniel's attempt to hurt us had only made our mission stronger and more visible. Isabella asked harder questions about her father as she got older. We worked with her therapist on age-appropriate ways to explain why he wasn't in our lives. She understood bad choices and consequences from school lessons about bullying. I showed her the restraining order and explained it meant he couldn't contact us because he'd been unsafe. She processed it quietly, then asked if we could get ice cream. Kids have an amazing ability to accept hard truths and move forward. Robert proposed on a random Tuesday while we were doing dishes after dinner. No grand gesture or public display, just him saying he wanted to spend his life with us if we'd have him. Isabella had gone to bed, but we woke her up to ask her opinion. She said yes immediately, then asked if this meant she'd get a brother or sister. We laughed and said, maybe someday. The wedding was small, just family and close friends in my mom's backyard. Isabella was my maid of honor, taking her duties very seriously. We bought a house in a good school district with the combined savings from our two households. 4 bedrooms seemed excessive until we filled them with Isabella's art studio, Robert's son's weekend room, and eventually a nursery. The neighborhood was full of families, kids riding bikes and playing until the streetlights came on. We installed security systems out of habit but never needed them. Daniel was a distant memory that surfaced less and less often. Isabella started middle school confident and secure, nothing like the scared woman I'd been at her age. She played violin in the advanced orchestra, ran track poorly but enthusiastically, and maintained a solid friend group. When drama inevitably happened, she handled it with maturity that surprised her teachers. She'd learned early that real problems existed in the world, so teenage gossip didn't faze her much. Her biggest concern was whether to try out for the school play or join the robotics club. The nonprofit expanded to 3 cities with satellite offices run by women we'd helped over the years. Anna, the college student from my speaking engagement, became our youngest director after finishing her degree in social work. She understood the mission viscerally and brought fresh ideas about reaching younger victims. We developed school programs teaching healthy relationships and digital safety before kids needed crisis intervention. Prevention became as important as response in our work. Daniel got out of prison when Isabella was 13 but stayed away as ordered. My lawyer kept tabs through legal channels, confirming he'd registered as required and maintained distance. He worked construction in Oregon, far from our East Coast life. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder in crowds, old habits dying hard, but mostly I forgot he existed for months at a time. He was just a cautionary tale I shared to help other women, not an active threat to our happiness. Isabella never asked to meet him, satisfied with the family she had. Robert officially adopted her when she was 14, a legal formality that meant everything symbolically. She hyphenated her last name by choice, honoring both the family that raised her and the one that chose her. The courtroom ceremony was emotional, with the judge commenting on what a beautiful family we made. Isabella played violin at the celebration dinner, finally skilled enough that people enjoyed listening. My second pregnancy at 40 was considered high risk, but proceeded smoothly. Isabella was thrilled about becoming a big sister, reading pregnancy books with more interest than her homework. She painted the nursery with Robert, choosing soft yellows and greens that would work for any gender. When her brother arrived healthy and loud, she was the first to hold him after us. The look of wonder on her face as she promised to protect him forever healed wounds I didn't know still existed. The support group evolved into a nationally recognized resource with a 24-hour helpline. We partnered with tech companies to develop better reporting systems and faster response times for harassment. Some platforms hired our graduates as consultants to improve their safety features. What started as my personal nightmare became a force for systemic change. Every policy update or new safety feature meant fewer women would suffer what we had endured. Isabella chose to attend college locally, not ready to leave her family despite acceptance letters from schools across the country. She majored in computer science with a minor in women's studies, combining technical skills with social awareness. Her senior thesis on preventing digital harassment through AI detection won awards and job offers from major tech companies. She chose a startup focused on online safety, wanting to build solutions from the ground up. Robert and I renewed our vows for our 10th anniversary with both kids in the wedding party. Isabella played violin while we exchanged rings again, her little brother trying to steal the show as ring bearer. My mom cried happy tears from the front row, surrounded by the village that had supported us through everything. The reception was in our backyard, simple and perfect with fairy lights and homemade food. Dancing with my daughter to the song she'd learned for the occasion, I realized we'd built exactly the life I'd dreamed of during those terrifying early days. Daniel died in a workplace accident when Isabella was 22. I found out through a news article about construction site safety violations, felt nothing but mild surprise that he was gone, like hearing about a stranger's passing. Isabella asked if I was okay when I told her, more concerned about my feelings than processing her own. We talked about complicated grief and how it's okay to feel nothing for someone who chose to be absent. She decided against attending any service, preferring to focus on her upcoming graduation. The nonprofit celebrated 20 years with Isabella as keynote speaker. She talked about growing up in the shadow of digital harassment but surrounded by women who refused to be victims. Her speech brought standing ovations as she announced new technology her company developed to help identify and prevent revenge, PEER using blockchain verification. Free licenses would be available to all our partner organizations. Watching my daughter turn our trauma into tools for healing others was the greatest victory imaginable. Isabella married at 25 to a wonderful woman named Maria, who understood our family's history without judgment. The wedding was joyful and drama-free, exactly as it should be. Her brother walked her down the aisle while Robert and I beamed from the front row. My mom, now in her 70s, danced at the reception like a woman half her age. The photographer captured 4 generations of strong women together, a testament to survival and thriving despite everything meant to break us. They gave me my first grandchild 2 years later through IVF, a daughter they named Hope. Holding her in the hospital room while Isabella recovered, I whispered promises just like Daniel once had. But mine were different. Promises of safety, unconditional love, and a family that would always protect her. Isabella watched me with tears in her eyes, understanding finally the fierce love that had driven every decision I'd made to keep her safe. The cycle of trauma ended with us. Isabella and Maria raised Hope with gentle boundaries and open communication. They brought her to age-appropriate nonprofit events where she grew up seeing women support each other through crisis. By 5, she was teaching other kids about body autonomy and asking for consent before hugs. The safety we'd fought to create was simply her normal, as it should have been for all of us from the beginning. I retired from day-to-day nonprofit operations at 60, staying on the board but letting younger voices lead. Anna had built the organization beyond my wildest dreams, helping thousands of women annually across the country. Isabella's company provided ongoing tech support, creating a beautiful full-circle moment. We'd turned personal nightmare into collective power, individual trauma into systemic change. The scared pregnant woman crying in her mother's house could never have imagined this outcome. Robert and I traveled in retirement, something I'd never felt safe doing before. We visited countries I'd only seen in movies, sending postcards to the grandkids from each destination. Isabella would text pictures of Hope reading them aloud, practicing geography on the world map in her room. Our son called from college with updates on his engineering projects, following his sister's path in tech, but focused on environmental solutions. The family we'd built against all odds thrived in ways that still amazed me. Sometimes young women would recognize me from speaking engagements or articles about the nonprofit. They'd approach nervously to share their stories or thank me for resources that helped them escape. I'd hug them if they wanted, remembering the isolation of those early days when I thought I was alone. Each woman who broke free added another crack in the system that had once protected men like Daniel and Jake. Change happened one survivor at a time until it became an avalanche. The best revenge was a life well lived, though I hadn't sought revenge at all. Just safety, justice, and the chance to raise my daughter in peace. What we built from those ashes was so much more. A movement, a family, a legacy of women refusing to be silenced. Isabella grew up to be everything Daniel tried to prevent. Strong, successful, and surrounded by love. She broke his hold before she could even walk, simply by existing in defiance of his cruelty. My story became teaching material in law schools and social work programs, a case study in surviving digital abuse. Professors would invite me to speak about the intersection of technology and domestic violence. Young lawyers would email saying our case inspired their career focus on helping abuse survivors. The ripple effects spread far beyond our family, touching lives we'd never know. Each person helped was another victory over the darkness that had once threatened to consume us. I spent my 70s writing a book about our experience and the nonprofit's growth, not for fame or money, but as a resource for women still trapped in digital harassment. Isabella helped edit, adding perspectives I hadn't considered about growing up with an absent father who was also a predator. We donated all proceeds to fund legal aid for survivors who couldn't afford lawyers. The book tour became a reunion tour, meeting women we'd helped over the decades who now helped others. Hope grew into a fierce advocate like her mother and grandmother before her. By high school, she was teaching digital safety workshops for younger students. She'd never experienced harassment herself, but understood its impact through the women in her life. When she left for college, she carried our legacy forward naturally, organizing campus resources for survivors and pushing for better policies. The protection we'd fought to give our children had become their gift to give others. Looking at photo albums with Isabella one quiet Sunday, we laughed at how young we'd both been in those early pictures. Her as a tiny baby, me as a terrified new mother trying to build safety from scratch. The photos showed our evolution. Support group meetings, nonprofit launches, graduations, weddings, grandchildren. A life fully lived despite someone's attempt to destroy it. We'd won simply by surviving, then thriving, then helping others do the same. Daniel became nothing more than a footnote in our much larger story of triumph.